DKDB Nashville.
Hello friends, Lou Pickney with you here. The DKDB update, February 13th, 2026. And we start with breaking news. Ole Miss quarterback Trinidad Chambliss received a preliminary injunction against the NCAA. This came across the news wires on Thursday evening, and so Chambliss will be returning to Ole Miss for the 2026 season. And it was interesting with Trinidad Chambliss. He was denied waivers by the NCAA. It goes back to the 2022 season when he was at Ferris State, the D2 school. And the question over his 2022 season, was it a medical redshirt situation with his chronic tonsillitis? Everything I saw showed that there was overwhelming evidence that there was. But the NCAA doesn't always do things in logical or rational ways. And there's also the fact that I don't know all the details behind the case. But it's big for the NFL draft in that here's yet another quarterback prospect that might have had late first round consideration. But instead, he gets to return to Ole Miss. He had a tremendous 2025. His head coach walked out on his team. Lane Kiffin skipped town for a bunch of money. Chambliss hung in there. He got Ole Miss to that semifinal round of the playoff, that thriller against Miami. It was a tough loss. Chambliss really impressed, though. And so now Trinidad Chambliss returns to Ole Miss for the 2026 season. It's a preliminary injunction, but they're not going to hear the case until after the season. So that is the story there with Chambliss. And so for any teams that might have had inclinations of maybe Chambliss late first, early second, surprise pick, well, if that's going to happen, it won't be until next year's draft. So good news for Rebels fans. Happiness in Oxford, Mississippi. Trinidad Chambliss staying in college football and making the 2027 quarterback class even more intriguing. But this was a long, arduous process. I'm sure some feeling of vindication for Chambliss, although it really should not have come to this, in my opinion. But again, I wasn't there. I've never been to Ferris State. I don't know what they told the NCAA. I don't know what some of those protocols are. Chambliss returns to Ole Miss for 2026. I think that's good for college football. It's good for Trinidad Chambliss. He'll make a lot more money at Ole Miss than he would have in all likelihood. I mean, maybe he would have lucked into a first-round spot, or maybe he falls to day 3. You don't know. Instead, Chambliss gets to stay where he wants to. Gets one more crack at it. And so we'll see what 2026 holds for Trinidad Chambliss and the Ole Miss Rebels. I have 2 NCAA men's lacrosse games I'll be calling later today. Music City Classic in Nashville. Check out SwannieTigers.com/watch, WATCH, if you want to check that out. I have some reactions here to some very recent mock drafts. A couple that went up yesterday, one from the day prior. And so let's start with Dan Parr from NFL.com. They've got quite a few analysts, experts over on, as you would imagine, with NFL.com. So let's see what Dan has here in his first mock draft of this cycle. It's the DKDB update. I'm your host, Lou Pickney. I encourage you to go to these various mock draft sites, read this for yourself. I'll have links, as I always do, in the description section of the video on YouTube. So as you would expect, Fernando Mendoza at 1. That's what Dan has to open it up. Arvell Reese at 2. More often than not, you're going to see that as the number 2 projection, as it is now for the Jets. At 3, Spencer Fano to the Arizona Cardinals. The thought with the Cardinals, if they go offensive tackle, it would likely be either Fano or Miami offensive tackle Francis Mauigoa. At 4, Dan Parr says Tennessee Titans, David Bailey. I think that's the right position for the Titans to target there at number 4. When you think about the value of that spot, and even if someone like Arvell Reese is gone, you can choose between David Bailey and Reuben Bain Jr., another excellent edge rusher out of Miami. Personally, I think Bain is a slightly better fit for the Titans because he can play as what they call a 3-down defensive end. You can have him in there on rushing plays, or presumed rushing plays, first and second down. He's not going to be a liability. David Bailey, a little bit lighter, but man, oh man, he can bring the heat off the edge. And so here, Dan Parr of NFL.com says the Tennessee Titans select David Bailey. At 5, New York Giants. Seen quite a bit of this. There are some people that kind of go with my line of thinking as it is now with LSU corner Mansour Delane. But if not that, then I think offensive tackle is a distinct possibility, especially if Francis Mauigoa is there. And so here, Dan Parr says Mauigoa to the Giants at 5. My reaction here to the first mock draft of the 2026 cycle for Dan Parr of NFL.com. Of course, you can get the links directly. Go to the DKDB. Put my name on it. Human curated. Human-made drafts. No AI. No committees. I put the best of the best in here. I put my name on it. No, I mean it. So again, reacting here to the first mock of this cycle for Dan Parr. At 6, Dan has Cleveland taking Caleb Downs, which is very interesting. Remember, Cleveland also has the number 24 selection. There's been a lot of thought the Browns might go offensive tackle or wide receiver here, with Mauigoa and Fano off the board. Instead, Cleveland goes with the dynamic Caleb Downs. Now, you're going to hear about this a lot over the next couple of months. There's not been a pure safety drafted in the top 10 of the NFL draft in 10 years. But if it's going to happen in the next couple of years, you would think this would be the draft with, well, Chambliss isn't in there now, so one fewer quarterback to think about, but not the bulk run of quarterbacks you see in some drafts near the top. And for Caleb Downs playing a non-priority position at safety, he's a unique talent. And so Dan Parr says Downs to the Browns at 6. At number 7, Washington Commanders, Jeremiah Love. Walter Football had similar thoughts with that as far as Love going to the Commanders. Think about with Jaden Daniels at quarterback, as much as I've talked about the possibility of what having Love as the running back in the backfield could mean for Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes, but think about Jaden Daniels trying to bounce back from last year. Had that great rookie year. You add an offensive weapon like Jeremiah Love, who's not just a good runner, but also a good receiver. Top of the class as far as running backs go. He could very easily be the only running back taken. And here, Dan Parr says Jeremiah Love to the Commanders at 7. At 8, New Orleans Saints, Carnell Tate. I like that. I've seen some speculation the Saints might go with Jeremiah Love if he's there, but I think wide receiver makes more sense relative to the talent that's likely to be on the board. And who knows, some of these receivers might not be there, and that could likely impact what the Saints do. Say, okay, if you take the receiver we want, there's an edge rusher that's still there. Maybe you go Caleb Downs if he's still there. All sorts of possibilities for the Saints. But here, Dan Parr says at number 8, New Orleans Saints, Carnell Tate, Ohio State wide receiver. At 9, Kansas City Chiefs, Reuben Bain Jr. And that is the thought with Kansas City. Maybe they go Love if he's there. If he's not, edge rusher, a possibility. So Bain not getting quite as many looks in the top 5 overall spots in some of these recent mocks I've reacted to. But here, Bain at number 9 to Kansas City. At 10, with Vanga. This is interesting to me. Cincinnati, a number of different needs. I wonder that front 7 on its defense. But Vanga, for most evaluators, the way it looks now, Caden Proctor is a unique case because he can play tackle or guard. But as far as guys that are strictly to be interior offensive linemen, Vanga, Yone, Penn State, and here it's Dan Parr saying Vanga to the Bengals at 10. At 11, Mansour Delane to the Dolphins. I like this if Delane is there. My most recent mock has Delane off the board at 5. But here, Dan Parr says at 11, Miami Dolphins, Mansour Delane. At number 12, Sonny Styles, Dallas Cowboys. That matches what I have. Just realistically, if Dallas wants to get Sonny Styles, a linebacker that is really a linebacker/safety hybrid, when you think about the way he started his career in Columbus, Ohio, a very versatile player. And so for Dallas, it's not reasonable to expect that Styles will be there at number 20 when they have another pick. So here, Dallas goes Sonny Styles. That's what I think is the most likely, the way it looks right now. Prior to free agency, a lot of things will change. Keep that in mind. But Dan Parr and I thinking alike here. Sonny Styles at 12 to Dallas. At 13, the Los Angeles Rams. First of 2 first-rounders they have. Pick they received in a trade with the Atlanta Falcons. And here they take Mekhi Lemon, receiver, Southern Cal, USC Trojans. Had a great 2025 season. I like that a lot. That could be a very nice fit for the Rams. At 14, Jordan Tyson to the Ravens. I've noticed this as of late. We've seen a bit of the, like if Lemon and Tyson don't go in the top 10, maybe they go more in this range here, 13, 14, back-to-back potentially. They don't go in some of those higher spots there. But another suggestion, the Ravens, as much as you might think interior offensive line, defensive line, but here, Jordan Tyson, wide receiver. That's what Dan Parr has at number 14. At 15, Dan has Akeem Mesidor to the Bucs. The Buccaneers need help at edge rusher. That has to be a priority position, and they'll have a lot of different talents to choose from there at 15. I still think Sonny Styles is the move if he's there. He's not here. And so Dan Parr says at 15, Mesidor to the Bucs. This is my reaction to the first mock draft of this cycle from Dan Parr of NFL.com. For the DKDB update, I'm Lou Pickney. I curate this, put my name on it. I believe in this. And wow, we're just 2 weeks into this rebrand from DraftKings to DKDB. Still on DraftKings.com, that domain. But DKDB, that is the place to go. Bookmark this page. I'm going to give you the best of the best. No committees, no AI. Just the best from the best. I've been doing this for 23 years. Or just the online stuff. I've been following the draft a lot longer than that. I know. A lot of talent out there. A lot of opinions. A lot to parse through. Let's continue here. My reaction to the first mock draft of this cycle from Dan Parr of NFL.com. At 16, Dan's got Jermod McCoy still on the board and going to the Jets. I think McCoy has an outside shot of going top 5 if he makes a very good impression with the New York Giants, as corner is a need there. But here it's the other New York team, the Jets. So the Jets get Arvell Reese at 2. You come back at 16. The Jets did not have a single interception last season. 0 interceptions in 17 games, which did not happen ever in the NFL, going back to the 1930s. Not a single time. Somehow it happened in and that was back when they played fewer games too. 17 games, 0 interceptions. You got to do something about that. And so if McCoy's here, that could certainly help. McCoy had a torn ACL in January of last year, but he should be fully recovered, able to go through the workouts. He'll impress people. His 2024 tape is great. And so the Jets get McCoy here, and Dan Parr's first mock draft of the 2026 cycle. At 17, Detroit Lions, Caden Proctor. A lot of thought the Lions will go offensive line. And Proctor is going to be a player you're going to see matched to a lot of different teams. He can play tackle. At 6'7", 366 pounds, he's athletic enough that he can remarkably play guard. He's got that level of athleticism, despite that size. You just don't hear of that. It's just unheard of. So for Proctor, it makes him an interesting, unique prospect, and so the Lions get Proctor here at 17. At 18, Dan has Avion Terrell to the Vikings. Corner is a need for Minnesota, so I like that pairing there. Terrell to the Vikings at 18. At 19, Carolina Panthers, Keldrick Falk. As Dan notes here, Falk won't turn 21 years old until September, so a young player. I think Falk makes more sense for the Panthers compared with Akeem Mesidor, who will turn 25 in early April. But one way or another, edge rusher needs to be addressed by the Panthers. Thought last year we were going to have that. Instead, they went with Tet McMillan, receiver. And so here, will this be the year the Panthers go with a first-round edge rusher? That's what Dan Parr has in his first mock, with Keldrick Falk from Auburn, edge rusher at 19 to the Carolina Panthers. At 20, Dallas Cowboys, second of 2 selections in the first round of this draft. This is the one they received as part of the Micah Parsons trade, the Green Bay Packers. And here, the Cowboys, after drafting Sonny Styles at 12, come back on the board. Cassius Howell, edge rusher, Texas A&M, had 11 and a half sacks last season. Major force in that edge. The only thing that really is similar to Reuben Bain Jr., arm length is a concern with Howell compared to the prototype. But look, you look at the results on the field, and I think they kind of speak for themselves. So Dallas, and perhaps they would go Falk if he's there, but if he's not, Cassius Howell at 20. At 21, Dan Parr, Pittsburgh Steelers, says Denzel Boston, the 6'4 receiver, would fill a need spot for the Steelers. They need to get a receiver in there. And obviously quarterback a question mark, Aaron Rodgers. I thought for sure he was going to be gone, done, moved on, as they say. But the talk is, well, old buddy a coach, maybe you talk him out for one more year. The Steelers could use him for one more season, to be sure, especially bring in Denzel Boston, draft him at 21, and that's a possibility for the Steelers. At 22, Dan Parr, LA Chargers, and this is interesting to me. Dylan Thieneman, seeing his name starting to show up a bit more and more in that mid-late first-round range. Really good player, solid safety. I'm going through watching his highlights. Hard hitter, but also very effective in pass coverage. And so the LA Chargers go safety. Dylan Thieneman, Oregon at 22. Dan Parr, 23, has Blake Miller to the Philadelphia Eagles. You'll see a lot of different positions mocked to the Eagles. I think of the Eagles, the Chicago Bears, and the Carolina Panthers. In this range are 3 teams that I find interesting, going through, as I read, a lot of mock drafts. And there are a lot of different players for those teams, a lot of different positions as well. Of course, before free agency, there is perhaps more variance to be considered. So anyway, Eagles, Blake Miller, 23. Miller's a name that starting to show up a bit more. There are a lot of offensive tackles or offensive lineman tweeners that seem to be getting at least consideration in this mid to late first range. Speaking of which, at 24, Cleveland back on the board. So Cleveland goes, and this is interesting, so Cleveland goes Caleb Downs at 6, the safety from Ohio State, and come back at 24. Monroe Freeling, offensive lineman, Georgia, bring him in to play tackle. So that could work out. That's what Dan Parr has at 24. At 25, Dan with the Chicago Bears says Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. And as Dan notes here, and I encourage you to go to the go to the DKDB, click on these links, go and read the evaluation. A lot of valuable info in here. And so here, Dan Parr of NFL.com says Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, safety from Toledo. A lot of talk about McNeil-Warren, maybe going at 18 to the Vikings, but here at 25 to the Bears, but notably as the third safety off the board. But I've seen a few that are like this that have 3 safeties going in the top 24, 25, 26 range. Could happen. At 26, Caden McDonald, Defensive tackle, Ohio State. The Bills could go receiver. Could do a few different things. Linebacker. But here, McDonald, who had 8.5 tackles for loss last season for the Buckeyes, despite playing nose guard of that zero position right up on the center. It's not an easy spot from which to make tackles for loss. But McDonald's got that athleticism to go with the size. And so here, Dan Parr says Bills, McDonald 26. At 27, San Francisco 49ers, Casey Concepcion. For anybody that has been watching my content for any appreciable amount of time, you might have noticed we've seen this quite a bit, and rightly so. Concepcion, real star player for the Aggies last season. Texas A&M, tough way the season ended for them, but they had a really strong run in 2025. Concepcion part of that. And here, Dan Parr's got him going to the 49ers, number 27. 28, Ty Simpson to the Jets. As they projected the Jets, they were going 3. Because the Jets have 3 first-round picks in next year's draft. So here it's a trade made to move to 28 in Dan Parr's mock draft. And the New York Jets select Alabama quarterback Ty Simpson, 23 years old, fewer than 20 career college starts, but he grew up in the business. His father has been coach for many years at the University of Tennessee Martin. He knows the business. He's savvy. And so maybe the Jets trade up. We're getting one more here in the first round, a third of them, and this one to be Ty Simpson. At 29, LA Rams back on the board, Caleb Lomu. So if the Rams at 13 go wide receiver, you come back at 29. And as we've seen here, there's offensive tackle prospect that's going to be in the mix to one degree or another. The Rams, now I don't know the Rams would necessarily go offensive tackle though. I think they might have some depth to help cover them for that. But Lomu's a younger player anyway, so you can work him into the mix. He's got some flexibility as well, position-wise. And so here, Dan Parr says Rams, Caleb Lomu, 29. Number 30, Kenyon Sadiq, the Broncos. You see Sadiq go in nearly all credible mock drafts at this point, and this seems to be about the floor. Okay. Sadiq's probably not getting past Denver at 30, at least based on the way it's looking from some of these estimates. And then to conclude here at 31, New England Patriots, TJ Parker, edge from Clemson. I had him in the top 10 of my early mock drafts before the season. His stats were a bit down compared to the prior 2 years, but he really impressed people in Mobile during practices for Senior Bowl week. I expect him to impress people later this month in Indianapolis at the Combine. TJ Parker, if he's still there on the board at 31, could be a nice addition to the AFC champion New England Patriots. And then at 32, Seattle Seahawks, Colton Hood, corner from, what is my computer doing? Oh, just scrolled up a bit. Colton Hood from Tennessee had to step up last season with Jermod McCoy out with injury. And so Seattle's going to lose corners to free agency. That's what happens. You win the Super Bowl, you're a free agent signed elsewhere to big money deals. That's life in the NFL. And so Seattle expected to need to get at least one top corner out of the draft. And here they get Colton Hood from Tennessee at number 32. That's my reaction to Dan Parr's first 2026 NFL mock draft. 2 more to go through here. Next from Rob Rank, Fox Sports. This one up just yesterday. So let's see. At number 1, Mendoza, the Raiders, just like you would imagine. Rob at 2, Arvell Reese. Matches what I have. And this is interesting at 3. Arizona Cardinals, Jeremiah Love at number 3 overall. A lot of unknowns for the Cardinals. What's going to happen with Kyler Murray? As much as I've heard that Murray's contract was supposedly untenable to trade, plus some indications, well, maybe, ... So, well, maybe they can work something out with a trade. I don't know. But Murray's not going to be back in Arizona in all likelihood next year. Or later this year. Next season. Anyway, Jeremiah Love. Great receiver, great runner, obviously consistent. And so Rob has the Cards going Love at 3. At 4, Sonny Styles to the Titans. Now, isn't that interesting? All up at number 4. That would be quite the move. So that would be with Cerise off the board. And then Sonny Styles. That'd be going Styles, the linebacker, and not an edge rusher. Or a receiver, for that matter. That's about as high as I can think I've seen Styles at all. Any sort of legitimate mock draft source. Which is interesting. So again, my reaction here to the latest mock draft from Rob Ring of Fox Sports. I never know with Fox, do I need to make it all caps? I really should, shouldn't I? Even though it doesn't really stand for anything. But then again, DKDB are just letters as well. Who might have knocked somebody else's? I just want to get it right, whatever. Anyway, number 5. Rob has Francis Maui Noah to the Giants. Maui Noah, solid part of that Miami Hurricanes offensive line. And so the Giants, I think offensive tackle will be given serious consideration here. That's what Rob has. Maui Noah to the Giants at 5. At 6, Cleveland Browns, Spencer Fano. I think Fano, he could slide into the top 10. Seen some indications of that, but there is demand for high-end offensive tackles. Cleveland back on the board again at number 24. And so here they go, offensive tackle. At 7, the Commanders, Washington gets Carnell Tate. Well, there has been talk the Commanders could go with some defensive players, notably an edge rusher. Here instead they go receiver, Carnell Tate, that remarkable ability to get open in 3 seconds or less, and just tremendous hands. The guy doesn't drop the ball. Number 8, New Orleans Saints. And while I think someone like Tate could be a nice pickup for the Saints, or maybe some other receivers instead, with Reuben Bain Jr. on the board, so edge rusher, so the Saints and Rob Ring's latest mock have Reuben Bain Jr. coming in, rushing off the edge. A great season with the Miami Hurricanes last year. At number 9, Kansas City Chiefs, Caleb Downs. So the Chiefs go with Downs. And again, if Downs goes in the top 10, he would be the first pure safety to be a top 10 pick in 10 years. But KC has it 9. And Rob Ring's mock, his latest mock. At 10, the Bengals, David Bailey. So these edge rushers sliding just a little bit. So Bailey at 10, a nice one there for Cincinnati. Particularly what happens with free agency, franchise tags, etc. Decisions still to be made, but edge rusher, Bailey's there. That could be the play for Cincy at 10. And number 11, Rob Ring has the Dolphins going with Jermod McCoy, corner from Tennessee. And again, the expectation, McCoy will do well in his workouts and his tests. Prove that he's all the way back from that torn ACL from more than a year ago. So Dolphins go corner at 11. At 12, it's corner. And I've seen this with a few mocks. So this does seem like a possibility as far as Dallas Cowboys going corner at 12. If he's there, Mansour Delane. Rob's got him going there at 12. There's some that believe these corners are more, if you're talking about the overall player rankings, if you want to try and put your own best board together, we're going to see these corners go maybe more in the 12, 13, 14, 15 range versus being a top 5 pick. All a matter of opinion, of course, but these evaluators, they've got a pretty good read on how a lot of these teams will be doing things as far as the evaluation process for the very top stars goes. At 13, LA Rams, Rob Ring says Makai Lemon. I think that'd be a great pairing. Receiver. Bring somebody that's going to be electric. And I guess if that happens, that works out for Makai Lemon. Gets to stay in the Los Angeles area, playing his college ball with the USC Trojans. At 14, Cassius Howell. Texas A&M edge to the Baltimore Ravens. So Rob Ring says Ravens defense. An edge rusher at 14 with Howell. 15, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Sonny Styles long gone in this one. So here, edge rusher, filling that need. The Bucs go with Keldrick Falk. He's got great size, so he'll be able to be on the field first and second down plays, or maybe some of the more specialty edge rushers will get maybe some fewer reps in there. Falk's not going to be a liability against a run. It's kind of a long way of saying that. At 16, this interests me. New York Jets going Colton Hood, corner, Tennessee. People will talk about Jermod McCoy, and obviously the knee injury was most unfortunate, but it created an opening, a need there for the Tennessee Vols. They needed somebody to step up as their top corner. Colton Hood had a very good season. The Jets have to do some things to improve their secondary. Arvell Arisa too, or if you go edge rush or whatever. That can't be all you do. Coming off a season with 0 interceptions. So Colton Hood to the Jets at 16. My reaction, latest mock draft from Rob Rang of Fox Sports. 17, Detroit Lions, Monroe Freeling, offensive tackle, Georgia. Mentioned earlier, offensive tackle is a perceived need for the Detroit Lions, and they will have several options in this range if that's the move. This interests me here at 18, C.J. Allen, linebacker, Georgia, to the Minnesota Vikings. A lot of talk the Vikings could go corner, could go with a safety, depending on what happens with Harrison Smith. Linebacker, off-ball linebacker, not what you would expect necessarily, but C.J. Allen, one of the very best at the position in this draft. So here, Rob Rang says Allen to the Vikings at 18. At 19, Casey Concepcion to the Carolina Panthers. And the Panthers, the Eagles, the Bears, certain teams you will see a lot of different players projected, a lot of different positions even. Carolina has many options, so perhaps they'll go with Casey Concepcion at 19. At 20, Rob Rang has the Cowboys going Gabe Jacobs, edge, Illinois. And so Cowboys go corner at 12, back at 20, go edge. 21, Pittsburgh Steelers, Jordan Tyson still on the board. So Pittsburgh gets Jordan Tyson here at number 21. And Rob Rang's newest mock, LA Chargers 22, Caleb Banks. Banks only played in 2 games this past season. But he really impressed people in Mobile during the Senior Bowl week practices, just like I thought he would, because you get somebody like Banks when he's healthy. He's got tremendous size and amazing athleticism for that size. And so perhaps the Chargers go defensive tackle. I don't think that's the move. I really don't think the Chargers go defensive tackle, and not 22 anyway, but we'll see. Perhaps they'll go in that direction with Caleb Banks. At 23, Caden Proctor, Philadelphia Eagles. You'll see Proctor a lot of different spots. I think for the Eagles, you're going to see the possibility. Well, and this is something that Rob actually notes here about Lane Johnson possibly retiring. And I think that offensive tackle has to be given serious consideration here by the Eagles at 23. At 24, Cleveland back on the board. Rob Rang says Denzel Boston to Cleveland at 24. Real nice pickup if that happens. 25, Chicago Bears. Bears go safety. Dylan Thieneman of Oregon. It's another vote. First round. Dylan was one of the only a couple players, like along with Kenyon Sadiq, who had remaining eligibility at Oregon but chose to go pro. He was a solid player at Purdue. He was a solid player at Oregon, and he should be a solid NFL safety. And here, Rob Rang's got him going to Chicago at 25. 26, Buffalo, Lee Hunter. There's some thought Buffalo might go receiver, might go linebacker, although if C.J. Allen is gone, that could change it. And instead, Lee Hunter, a defensive tackle. It's getting a lot of talk as of late as a possible mid to late first round pick. Part of an excellent Texas Tech defense from this past season. Number 27, the San Francisco 49ers, Rob Rang says Kenyon Sadiq. Just mentioned Sadiq. Sadiq looks very likely to be a first-round pick, and in all likelihood will be the lone tight end drafted in the first. We never know for sure, but that's the way it looks now. At 28, so here's one with Vanga sliding a bit. Seen some of him in the top 20, even if not getting past the LA Chargers at 22. But here, Vanga, offensive guard to the Texans. That would be really a nice fit for the Texans. A guy that could go well above this spot. Bills a need. Texans need help at interior offensive line. So I like that a lot for the Texans if Rob Rang's projection here comes true. At 29, the Rams back on the board. Avion Terrell. Now what the Rams have at 13. Let's quick reminder. Okay, so they go Makai Lemon. That's what I thought, but I want to be sure. So you go Lemon there at 13. You come back at 29, and you go corner Avion Terrell out of Clemson. A solid performer. And the question with Terrell is, do you think with his frame that he can handle the rigors? That 17-game NFL schedule. If so, it'd be a great pickup right there for the Rams at 29. At 30, Denver Broncos, Kyle Lewis, linebacker, Pittsburgh. So Denver is noted here. They've got a couple guys at linebacker facing free agency. So you can hear a lot of linebackers mentioned to Denver's possibilities at 30. So that's what Rob Rang has here with Kyle Lewis. At 31, Blake Miller. Some more talk of Miller as a late first offensive tackle. Moving into that night one spotlight right there. The New England Conference champions. Here Rob Rang has him taking Blake Miller. Finally at 32, Seattle Seahawks, Brandon Cisse. We know the Seahawks will in all likelihood need to draft at least one top-notch corner. And Cisse is going to test well. That's the expectation. A tremendous speed. So that is what Rob Rang has for his latest 2026 NFL mock draft. We'll go through one more here real fast with Kyle Dvorchak of NBC Sports. Kyle's first mock draft of this cycle. One, Mendoza to the Raiders. I mean, everybody's going to have that. If somebody doesn't have that, question your sources. And 2, Jets with Reese. Spencer Fano to the Cards. And so you'll see a mix with Fano. You'll see some that'll say top 3, and I had that at one point. I mean, there are some because there are some indications that maybe he'll slide more into the teams. All you need is one team to go for you, and that's what matters. And so here the Cardinals fill a right tackle need with Spencer Fano out of Utah. Kyle at 4's got Bain to the Titans. I particularly think Bain as a 3-down defensive end will be strong against the run, that he would be a really good fit for a Titans defense that needs an absolute ace from the outside. Get Bain from the outside, Jeffrey Simmons, that interior push, and maybe the Titans can do some things in that front 4 in defense. Number 5, New York Giants, Francis Maui-Noa. More and more talk about that, if he's there. Maui-Noa to the Giants at 5. At 6, Caleb Downs, Cleveland Browns. Another Downs to the Browns talk. Cleveland, of course, back on the board at 24 as well in this upcoming draft. Downs is absolutely amazing with his ability to read and react. It's just safety is not seen as a priority position. It makes it unusual for a player playing that position to go that high. That's what got right here. My reaction to Kyle Dvorchak, CBS Sports. But Kyle at 7, David Bailey, edge to the Commanders. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think if you're the Commanders, hey, look, if we know we can likely get either Arvell Reese, which that part's unlikely, or Reuben Bain Jr., or David Bailey. I mean, it's not a lock, but you're probably going to get one of those 3 guys there at 7, if that's what the Commanders want. At 8, the New Orleans Saints, Carnell Tate. If Tyler shucks somebody to throw the ball to, Tate would certainly help with that. Reliable, consistent, catches everything. Remarkable ability to get open quickly. At 9, Kansas City Chiefs, Jeremiah Love. Gotta be, if he's there. If he actually is there at 9, I think the Chiefs could go with him. It makes a lot of sense. So this is my reaction. Mock draft, the first of this cycle, from Kyle Dvorchak of NBC Sports. At 10, Peter Woods to Cincinnati. I've seen that from a few places now. Woods, that remarkably quick first step, exceptional quickness for a defensive tackle. It could happen. At 11, the Dolphins go receiver, Jordan Tyson. Interesting. So Kyle says Tyson to the Dolphins at 11. Keldrick Fox. So here, Cowboys go with an edge at 12, knowing they're back on the board at 20. But Fox, he's not from Georgia. Fox from Auburn. Is there a different Keldrick Fox? Is this like the other Adrian Peterson? When there were two running backs in the NFL named Adrian Peterson? I'm pretty sure we're talking Keldrick Fox, edge out of Auburn. At 13, Dermod McCoy. LA Rams, if he's there, if one of those top corners is there at 13, depending as well on the receivers that may be there, the Rams, they're going to have to give that a long look. So the Rams go with 13, Dermod McCoy. In my reaction here to the latest mock draft, the first of this cycle, Kyle Dvorchak, CBS Sports. Kyle at 14 says Akeem Mesidor. Mesidor, he'll be 25 in early April. He's old by NFL prospect, first round in particular considerations, but had just a fantastic season with the Hurricanes. Here the Ravens go at 14 with Mesidor. 15, Sonny Styles actually on the board for once, and here when he's on the board, he goes to the Bucs. I think that's what's going to happen. If he happens to be there, I just don't know the likelihood of that. 16, Mansour Delane still on the board. For the Jets, that's a break there. They can get Delane at 16. And some people do think this is more the range of where the corners and the best overall player discussion would go. But Delane would fit a need, certainly, for the Jets. He'll get you some interceptions. At 17, Vanga to the Lions. So instead of going tackle, like a lot of people have been thinking with the Lions and the possibilities there at 17, instead, Vanga, he's not going to play tackle, but he's one of the very best interior offensive line prospects in the draft. Great career at Penn State. And so here it's Vanga to the Lions at 17. In my reaction here, Kyle Dvorchak, Kyle at 18. Minnesota Vikings, Avion Terrell. Phil's a need a corner for sure. Number 19, Kenyon Sadiq. Seeing more and more of this. Sadiq to the Panthers at 19. Panthers with a whole bunch of options, the way it looks right now at least. But Sadiq to the Panthers, it makes sense. At 20, Dallas Cowboys back on the board, and it's Brandon Cisse. And Cisse is expected to wow people with his workouts, especially his high-end speed, 40-yard dash, etc. Also physical, too. He's not just a track guy, which makes him intriguing. And I still maintain he is a dark horse to be the first corner drafted. I don't think it's likely to happen, okay? So don't misunderstand that. But I think it's within the realm of possibility, and it's duly noted here. Dallas at 20, Brandon Cisse. At 21, Kyle's got Mekhi Lemon, Pittsburgh Steelers. I like that a lot. If Lemon is there, would fill a big need for the Steelers at receiver. At 22, Chargers go Caden McDonald. They go defensive tackle. Which of those 8.5 tackles for loss past season for McDonald. They're playing nose tackle, nose guard for Ohio State. Just super athletic, able to get into the backfield and disrupt things. At 23, here's another thought of Caden Proctor, if he's there going to the Eagles to play tackle. If they could get Proctor, keep him healthy and dialed in, he can be dominant for the Eagles. That could be a really big pickup right there, if it happens. A lot of ifs, but it's something to keep in mind. At 24, Cleveland back on the board. Going Caleb Lomu. I really like Lomu at Cleveland at 24. They'd up at 6, whether you're going with Caleb Downs or if you're going with, say, a receiver, Carnell Tate, Mekhi Lemon, Jordan Tyson, whatever. But you come back at 24, offensive line, a need for the Browns. Lomu is a young player, redshirt sophomore. And so for the Browns, who are not expected to give a serious push to making the Super Bowl this upcoming season, you get Lomu, a very young player. Let him start to develop over time. And then maybe you got some options when that Deshaun Watson monstrosity of a contract finally disappears from the ledger. Yikes. 25. Chicago Bears, Cassius Howell. So if Howell is there, and again, there's the question, will the arm length be enough to keep some teams from going for him higher in this spot? Or will the 11.5 sacks last season say, okay, we want some of that in our team? So the Bears, a lot of thoughts with what the Bears are going to do. But that includes defensive line, and here it's Cassius Howell, the Bears at number 25. At number 26, my reactions here to Kyle Dvorchak's mock draft, and Kyle at 26, Denzel Boston to the Bills. Love that pairing. Big body receiver to go in there. Still a need for Buffalo. At 27, Caleb Banks still on the board, going to the 49ers at 27. And Banks, if he can stay healthy, he's going to be a dominant defensive tackle in the NFL. He's just very athletic, and he's got the size to match. 28, Monroe Freeling, tackle from Georgia. Houston Texans. I wonder if they might kick Freeling inside, play guard. We'll see if and when that happens. The Texans can decide. At 29, more offensive linemen going. LA Rams. So at 13, if you go with a receiver or corner, if you're going offensive tackle at 29, I still don't think you have to press. I know, Havenstein retired. And maybe this didn't reflect that he has retired. And that guy went all the way back to their time in St. Louis. He was a long timer there. But the indications I'm hearing out of LA from the Rams is that they believe, or at least that's the perception is they believe that they have in-house somebody that can take care of that versus having to use a first-round pick on an offensive tackle. Of course, the right player's there, and you see it feeling a need, then suddenly plans can change. And so here's Dunker to the Rams at 29. At number 30, TJ Parker, edge from Clemson, who had that great showing in Mobile. Senior Bowl practices. Denver gets an edge rusher with Parker at 30. At 31, Casey Concepcion to the Patriots, so a receiver to the Patriots. That's interesting. And finally, C.J. Allen still on the board and going to the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks at 32. So that's my reaction there to Kyle Dvorchak's first 2026 NFL mock draft. So I encourage you, go to the DKDB. Read these for yourself. I update this on a daily basis. You see this? 5:22 a.m. Eastern. And so that kind of lull period between now and the start of the NFL Combine. And once we get to there, look out. Again, remember, Trinidad Chambliss returning to Ole Miss. He gets to play another season of college football. I'm happy for him. I think that was the right thing to have happen, even if it took a court decision in the state of Mississippi, as opposed to the NCAA making it happen. All right, so that's it for this DKDB update for February 13th. I'm your host, Lou Pickney. Remember the DKDB, my personally curated, expert-curated 2026 NFL mock draft database. No AI, no committees, no slop, just the best of the best. I put my name on it. I believe in it. So that's it for this update. Thanks for watching. We'll talk again soon. Bye for now.